What's up? I'm Syrobe, and I've been creating the most game-breaking builds for Elden Ring for almost a year now, and I've been constantly redefining the meta by myself. Some of you might be new here and think I'm full of shit, so allow me to make my case. Yeah, I don't fuck around when it comes to builds. I'm always at meta level, and my builds are always and have always been purely mathematically correct. But there are so many builds that just got buffed in the most recent Elden Ring patch 1.09 that I can't wait to test. Go watch my video on the changes here if you haven't already. But that's not important right now. What's important is that I made another spreadsheet which I had to completely redo the numbers for after patch 1.09. I was crafting a Black Flame build before patch 1.09 released, and I was like, I'm gonna wait a little to post it just in case Elden Ring does the funny and puts out a patch right after that changes my build. Well, Miyazaki did a funny and released the anniversary patch 1.09 within the next few days, which luckily ended up making this build even stronger than before, which now allows it to one-shot Margit by dealing around 4,000 damage in a single hit, with the right setup of course, and I'll get into that in a bit. Anyways, I rarely see anyone doing Black Flame builds, probably because FromSoft made them all relatively weak, but if you think I can't make any build broken, you must once again be new here. So be sure to drop a fat fucking like and a massive sub because we are about to hit 100,000 subscribers together on this channel, and I do everything from the build ideas to the math and even editing every single video myself. Subscribing is completely free and helps me out a ton, and in exchange, I'll be showing even more broken builds very soon. Okay, let's get right into the build. For all the loser nerds out there like myself, this is my spreadsheet I made to test the one-shot potential of the Godslayer Greatsword and other numbers. But this is the core weapon that this build is centered around. The Godslayer Greatsword was already very strong before patch 1.09, but every other build featuring this weapon is now outdated because the most recent patch allows this weapon to deal even more damage than before. But first, let's talk about exactly how Black Flame works because I see a lot of people get this wrong. First off, there are 3 categories of fire in Elden Ring. There is regular fire as seen in standard pyromancy spells, and Ashes of War like Flame of the Redmanes. This kind of fire deals 100% fire damage and nothing else. Then we have Black Flame. Black Flame is pretty much the exact same as regular pyromancies because it also deals 100% fire damage. However, the only difference is that Black Flame has that damage over time burn that is applied as soon as it hits an enemy. Lastly, we also have Destined Death, which looks like a dark red flame. This is actually a type of fire that deals holy damage and not fire damage despite how it looks. I tested this by using fire buffs and saw no increase in damage, and then when I used holy buffs, it increased the initial impact damage. Destined Death even applies a similar damage over time just like Black Flame, but it also has the added bonus of reducing the total value of an enemy's max HP by 10% for a few seconds. But anyways, this video is about Black Flame, so let's break down how that works, because this is what most people get wrong. Black Flame always deals fire damage on first contact, but the damage over time that slowly chips away at an enemy's HP is not fire damage and not physical damage either. The Black Flame damage over time is based on an enemy's max percent HP value. To put it simply, max percent HP damage is damage that cannot be reduced by any defensive stat. For example, the Godslayer Ash of War deals around 2.5% of a boss's HP as burn damage over time. Margit has 4,174 HP, and the Black Flame damage over time consistently did 100 points of burn damage to Margit. The Black Flame Fireball also did 100 burn damage, and the Black Flame Blade did 100 burn damage as well, which means Black Flame deals around 2.5% of a boss's max HP as damage to them over 2 seconds. Fun fact, none of that info was listed on the Fextra Life wiki or anywhere that I could find, so all of this testing was done by myself manually, so please drop a sub for that. Anyways, that burn damage over time is purely based on the target's max HP and ignores all their defensive stats and attacks their life points directly. So for the Godslayer Greatsword, the weapon's main attacks deal a mix of physical and regular fire damage every time it hits. There is no Black Flame on its individual hits despite how it looks, which I pray to Lord Miyazaki to add that because it'd be so fucking cool. But unfortunately, it only applies Black Flame after hitting the second part of its Ash of War. Not even the first part applies it. However, when you use the Ash of War, those hits deal pure fire damage. This same concept applies to all Black Flame spells as well. After your attacks impact, they deal pure fire damage, but also separately apply the Black Flame's damage over time, which is what deals the max percent HP damage. The burn damage over time does not stack, but its duration is refreshed every time you hit something. So as long as you keep hitting someone with Black Flame, they will keep burning. It's interesting to note that things like the Godslayer seal says it buffs the Godslayer incantations by 10%, but this does not buff the damage over time at all. In fact, the damage over time is impossible to increase with any buff at all. All applicable buffs only increase the initial fire damage, not the damage over time. So to TLDR, there are 3 types of fire damage in Elden Ring. Pure fire damage with nothing else, Black Flame, which is also pure fire damage and then burns damage over time based on max percent HP. Then lastly, Destined Death, which deals holy damage, burn damage over time, and reduces enemy max HP by 10% for a few seconds. Okay, that was a lot of nerd shit about Black Flame, but it's important to get all the facts right. Now onto the build. As you have already seen, this build does a ton of damage, but with my setup, I've cultivated the min-max stats that makes this build the most efficient for damage output. My min-max provides the highest damage possible for the Ash of War with 30 strength, 55 dex, and 25 faith. And this was the stat spread I used to one-shot Margit with the Godslayer Greatsword, which I'll get into in a bit. But this is also where Miyazaki did a funny, because patch 1.09 buffed the damage scaling of all Greatswords, which ended up buffing the damage to the Godslayer Greatsword as well. So before patch 1.09, my min-max offered the most damage rather than just fully maxing dexterity. After patch 1.09, the difference between min-maxing or full maxing dex is so minimal that it really doesn't matter which one you use. So instead, for the sake of efficiency, you can go 25 strength, 55 dex, and 30 faith for the new min-max. It gives you very slightly less total AR for the weapon, but it also gives you access to all of the best Black Flame spells and the Godslayer seal, which isn't possible to use by purely maxing dex. And meeting the minimum requirements for Black Flame spells is still valuable because even having 90 points of faith doesn't increase the damage over time either. It would only increase the initial fire damage from the Black Flame spells, but it's not worth it as your main weapon would be pretty useless with just faith. To be honest, there are about 3 good Black Flame spells that exist in this game. These 3 spells are Black Flame, Scouring Black Flame, and Black Flame's Protection. First off, Scouring Black Flame is miles better than Black Flame Ball in almost every way. The Black Flame Ball only has a single hitbox on its impact and explosion. Scouring Black Flame has more damage due to it having multiple hitboxes. These multiple hitboxes constantly refresh your Black Flame's damage over time and can hit a target more than once. Both of these spells can be charged to deal more damage, but the only problem is the Scouring Black Flame's short range. It can be a little tricky hitting your target, but it's way more valuable when you do. Also, I bet I'm going to see some comments complaining that my talisman reduces my defensive stats and that it's bad and I'm a noob for using them and not talking about them. But there's actually a specific reason. By using my min-max stats and reaching 30 faith, you can use Black Flame's Protection whenever you want, which is a spell that increases your physical defense by 35% for 70 seconds. It also reduces all healing by 20%, but that doesn't matter too much since you become super tanky with this spell. It gives you 35% physical negation, which is almost as much as what you get from wearing a full Bull Goat set. You also can't use Flame Grant Me Strength and Black Flame Protection at the same time, so I'd recommend to use Black Flame for harder late game bosses. This spell comes in clutch, so if you're like me and you want drip over defense, this more than makes up for that. While I do recommend to use the new updated min-max that I just showed a few moments ago, the final section is dedicated to how I one-shot Margit and the setup that I used. You know I don't like using tons of buffs for my builds because they aren't really practical, as any weapon is going to be strong when you pile on enough buffs. But there is one new buff I have to show off since it just got added in patch 1.09. Most of you know the Jellyfish Shield buffs your damage by 20%, but patch 1.09 bugged this item and you can use it 2 times and even unequip the shield and still keep the buffs. Before patch 1.09, this buff could only be used once and instantly disappeared if you took it off. Now, the damage buff stays even when you remove the shield, and it can be applied once on your left hand and once on your right hand. It cannot stack more than this, but it's super interesting because the patch 1.09 doesn't mention anything about this, which is why it's likely a bug, but honestly, just keep it this way. It feels like this is how it should have been to begin with. Anyways, for the setup, these are my stats once again. These are the talisman I used, and I make use of only 3 spell buffs. First, drink your flask with the Flame Shroud and Crack tier and the Strength Knot tier. Then follow the buffs exactly. Golden Vow Ash of War first, Flame Grant Me Strength spell second, Jellyfish Shield on one hand, Sip Mana Flask, then Jellyfish Shield on the other hand, and taking everything off is okay as well because you keep all your buffs anyways and will fat roll too much gear on. Also, the Golden Vow Ash of War is used since you get it at the very start in Limgrave for free, and Flame Grant Me Strength is nearby in Caelid, and it buffs all fire damage and physical damage, which we actually make use of both benefits since our sword deals fire and physical damage. And the Jellyfish Shield bug is just really interesting since it's never worked like this until the most recent patch, but hey, I'm not complaining because having your buff disappear when you take the shield off felt more like a bug anyways. Stacking just these few buffs grants this weapon over 4,000 damage in a single hit. And in case you didn't know, the Godslayer Greatsword has 3 parts to its Ash of War, which will let you do even more damage if you hit all 3. The initial hit damage-wise is like a weak one-handed attack, but the secondary follow-up attack is where the massive damage comes in and applies the Black Flame damage over time after. And the third and final follow-up attack also deals insane damage as well and refreshes the damage over time from Black Flame. This build and setup will allow you to shred almost any boss in the game with relative ease. It's not just good on Margit, but very efficient on a ton of bosses. My biggest critiques for this weapon is that the animation of the Ash of War is so slow and the initial hit doesn't apply Black Flame, and neither do the regular attacks. Regardless of all that shit, this weapon is cool as f and deals huge damage, so I don't care. If you made it to the very end, please hit that subscribe button as we are super close to 100,000 subs, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.